The rain hammered against my face like tiny needles, each drop colder than the last. I stood on the front steps of the Hartley mansion, the place I'd called home for 5 years, clutching a single suitcase that held everything I was allowed to keep. The door had just slammed shut behind me, and through the frosted glass, I could see Constance's silhouette turn away, her duty done. 7 days. It had been exactly 7 days since I'd buried my husband. The funeral dress I wore was still black, still the same one I'd worn when they lowered Benedict into the ground. I hadn't had the strength to change into anything else this morning, when Felicity handed me the eviction notice with a smile on her face. My fingers were numb. Whether from the cold or from shock, I couldn't tell anymore. I want to go back 3 days to the reading of the will. I need you to understand what happened in that room, because it changed everything. We sat in the attorney's office in downtown Atlanta, the one with the mahogany furniture and the smell of old books and expensive cologne. Benedict's family attorney, Mr. Pearson, sat behind his desk looking uncomfortable. Constance sat to my right, dressed in black Chanel, her pearl necklace catching the light. Felicity was on my left, checking her phone every few seconds, clearly bored. I was still drowning in grief. My husband, my kind, brilliant, loving Benedict, had died suddenly from a heart condition nobody knew he had. One moment he was kissing me goodbye before a business trip. The next I was getting a phone call from a hospital telling me he was gone. Just like that. 38 years old and gone. Mr. Pearson cleared his throat and began reading. I barely heard the first part, the formal language, the legal terms. Then he got to the distribution of assets. To my beloved mother, Constance Hartley, I leave the family mansion at 1847 Rosewood Drive, including all furnishings, artwork, and grounds. Constance nodded, satisfied. To my dear sister Felicity Hartley, I leave my 50% controlling share in Hartley Enterprises, along with all associated assets, accounts, and holdings. Felicity actually squealed. She squealed at her brother's funeral, reading like she'd won a game show prize. Then came my name. To my wife, Lydia Hartley, I leave the property located in Willow Creek, including the structure and land therein. Silence. Then Felicity burst out laughing. Not a polite chuckle, a full, cruel laugh that echoed off the office walls. Willow Creek, she gasped between giggles. That abandoned dump. Oh, Benedict, you were charitable to the end. I looked at Mr. Pearson, confused. I don't understand. What property in Willow Creek? Benedict never mentioned. It's a shack, Constance interrupted, her voice like ice. A horrible little shack in the middle of nowhere that Benedict's grandfather won in a card game decades ago. Nobody's lived there in 20 years. She turned to me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. But it's yours now, dear. Congratulations. My throat tightened. But what about... we lived in the mansion together. Where am I supposed to... The mansion is mine now, Constance said firmly. As it should be. It's a Hartley family home. And you, my dear, are no longer part of this family in any way that matters. That's not fair, I whispered. Benedict and I. Benedict is dead. Felicity's voice cut through my protest. She was recording me on her phone. The camera pointed right at my face. And honestly, Lydia, did you really think you'd get everything? You were a waitress when he met you. A waitress. You should be grateful he left you anything at all. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell them that Benedict loved me, that our marriage was real, that I belonged there. But the words wouldn't come. I just sat there, tears rolling down my cheeks while Felicity kept recording, and Constance looked at me like I was something unpleasant she'd found on the bottom of her shoe. You were always just a poor girl playing dress-up in our world, Constance said softly. Benedict was generous to leave you anything at all. The property in Willow Creek has a roof and walls. That's more than many people have. Mr. Pearson looked distinctly uncomfortable. Mrs. Hartley, if you'd like to contest the... She won't contest anything. Constance interrupted. Will you, Lydia? I shook my head. What was the point? Benedict had written the will. These were his wishes. Even dead, even gone, he'd chosen to give me nothing but an abandoned shack, while his family took everything else. The betrayal hurt worse than his death. 4 days later, Felicity appeared at my bedroom door with an envelope. Eviction notice. she said cheerfully. You have until tomorrow morning to vacate. I'd start packing if I were you. Felicity, please, I begged. Can't I have a few weeks to figure things out? To find somewhere to? The Willow Creek property is somewhere, she interrupted. Mother's being very generous. Actually, she could have you removed today, but she's giving you until tomorrow. I'd say thank you if I were you. That night, I packed everything I owned into one suitcase. 5 years of marriage, and it all fit in one bag. Constance had made it clear that anything Benedict had bought me, the clothes, the jewelry, the books, belonged to the estate. I was allowed my personal items from before the marriage and nothing else. I'd walked through the house one last time, touching the walls, remembering the kitchen where Benedict taught me to make his grandmother's recipe for shepherd's pie, the living room where we'd danced on our first anniversary, the bedroom where we'd held each other and planned a future that would never come. All gone now. That morning, I'd called a taxi. Constance and Felicity watched from the doorway as I loaded my suitcase into the trunk. As the taxi started to pull away, I heard Felicity laugh and say loudly enough for me to hear, "Good riddance to bad rubbish." The taxi driver asked me where we were going. I gave him the address Mr. Pearson had written down for me, the only address I had left in the world. He looked at me strangely but put it into his GPS. Willow Creek? That's 3 hours away, ma'am. You sure? I nodded. Where else could I go? I had no family of my own. My parents had died years ago. I had no friends outside the social circle Benedict's family had allowed me to have, and those people had stopped returning my calls the moment Benedict died. I had £200 in my bank account and nowhere else to go. The drive was long. Rain started falling about an hour in and never stopped. I watched the city fade away, replaced by suburbs, then small towns, then nothing but fields and forests. The GPS led us down smaller and smaller roads until we were on a dirt path with grass growing down the middle. Finally, the taxi stopped. The driver turned around, concern on his face. Ma'am, are you sure this is it? I said quietly. Thank you. I paid him with most of my remaining cash and stepped out into the rain. The taxi drove away quickly, kicking up mud, and I stood there, staring at what was now my home, a shack. Constance hadn't been exaggerating. Wooden boards covered the windows, the roof sagged in the middle. Weeds grew wild all around it, nearly hiding a broken fence. Paint peeled from the walls in long strips. One shutter hung loose, banging against the siding in the wind. This was what Benedict had left me. This was what I was worth to him in the end. I walked up to the front door, my shoes squelching in the mud. The door wasn't locked. Nobody would want to break into this place. I pushed it open and stepped inside. Darkness swallowed me whole. I woke up on the floor with dust in my throat, and tears dried on my face. For a moment, I couldn't remember where I was. Then it all came rushing back, the eviction, the taxi ride, the shack. I'd collapsed just inside the doorway last night and cried until sleep took me. My body ached. The wooden floor had left marks on my skin, and my neck was stiff from using my suitcase as a pillow. Grey morning light filtered through cracks in the boarded windows, creating thin stripes across the dusty room. I sat up slowly and looked around properly for the first time. The room was larger than I'd thought in the darkness. Old furniture sat covered in white sheets like ghosts. A sofa, 2 armchairs, a side table. Everything was coated in thick dust that made me cough when I moved. My mouth was so dry it hurt to swallow. I needed water. I pushed myself to my feet, my legs unsteady. Through a doorway, I found a kitchen. The sink was rusted, the cupboards hanging open and empty. I turned the tap, not expecting anything, but water sputtered out brown at first, then running clearer. I cupped my hands and drank, not caring that it tasted metallic. It was water, and I was so thirsty, I thought I might faint. When I'd drunk my fill, I explored further. The kitchen had an old cooker that probably hadn't worked in years, and a refrigerator with the door hanging open. Mouse droppings scattered across the counters. I shuddered and moved on. Stairs led to the upper floor. Each step creaked under my weight, and I half expected the wood to give way, sending me crashing through. But the stairs held, and I found myself in a narrow hallway with 2 doors. The The first room was small and empty except for a metal bed frame with no mattress. Water stains marked the ceiling, and the wallpaper peeled in long curls. I backed out and tried the second door. This room was different. Smaller, but something about it felt less abandoned. The same dust covered everything, but the furniture seemed more intact. A single bed with a bare mattress, a small wardrobe, a wooden chair by the window, and on the windowsill, something that made me freeze in place. A jasmine plant in a ceramic pot, green and alive and thriving. I walked toward it slowly, like it might disappear if I moved too quickly. My hands trembled as I touched the leaves. They were real, fresh. The soil in the pot was dark and moist, recently watered. Jasmine. Benedict's flower. On our first date, he'd brought me jasmine flowers instead of roses. I'd asked him why, and he'd smiled that gentle smile of his and said, "Roses are what everyone gives. Jasmine means something more love and devotion that survives beyond death. I wanted you to have something that lasts." I'd pressed those flowers in a book. They were probably still in the mansion, thrown away by now along with everything else of mine that Constance deemed worthless. But here was jasmine again, growing in an abandoned house that no one had lived in for 20 years. Someone had been here. Recently, someone had planted this and cared for it. My heart started beating faster. I looked around the room with new eyes. Everything was dusty and old. But this plant was alive. Why? Who had put it here? I knelt down and examined the pot more carefully. Plain ceramic, nothing special. But when I touched the soil, my fingers hit something hard. Not a stone, something metal. I dug into the dirt, my fingernails getting caked with earth, until I pulled out a small silver key. It was tarnished but solid, with an ornate pattern on the handle. My pulse thundered in my ears. This was deliberate. The jasmine. The key, someone had left this for me. Benedict had left this for me. I stood up, clutching the key, and started searching the room properly. What would it open? I checked the wardrobe locked, but the key was too small. I tried the bedside table drawers, but they slid open easily, empty inside. I looked under the bed, behind the wardrobe, running my hands along the walls for hidden compartments. Nothing. I moved to the other bedroom, then back downstairs, checking every lock, every drawer, every cupboard. The key fit nothing. Frustration built in my chest. Why leave me a key if there was nothing to open? I returned to the bedroom with the jasmine plant and sat on the bare mattress, staring at the key in my palm. Think, Lydia. Benedict was clever. He wouldn't make this obvious. If Constance or Felicity had come here first, and they must have, to know the place was abandoned, he'd want them to miss it. My eyes travelled around the room slowly. The wardrobe, the chair, the window with the jasmine, the walls with their peeling paper, and above the bed, a painting. I'd barely noticed it before. A landscape rolling green hills and a grey sky, the kind of bland artwork you'd find in a charity shop. The frame was simple wood, nothing valuable, but it was the only decoration in the entire house. In a place stripped bare of everything else, why would this painting remain? I stood on the mattress and lifted the painting off its hook. It was lighter than I expected. I turned it around, checking the back for a note or a message, but found nothing. Then I looked at the wall where the painting had hung. There, set into the plaster, was a small metal door about the size of a book. A safe. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped the key. I climbed off the bed and stood in front of the safe, my heart hammering against my ribs. This was it. Whatever Benedict had left me, whatever he'd planned, it was behind this door. The key slid into the lock smoothly. It turned with a soft click. I pulled the safe door open. Inside wasn't the fortune I'd half expected, no stacks of money or jewellery. Instead, I found something stranger. 4 bottles of water, neatly arranged, 3 tins of beans, a tin opener, a torch, a mobile phone with a charging cable, an envelope with cash inside. I counted it quickly. About £500. And a first-class airplane ticket to London. I picked up the ticket with trembling fingers. The date was 2 days from now. The name on it, Lydia Hartley. Beneath the ticket was a note, folded once. I recognized Benedict's handwriting immediately, the careful, precise letters he always used. My vision blurred with tears as I unfolded it and read, "My darling Lydia, if you're reading this, I'm gone. But I made sure you'd be safe. Go to London. Everything is waiting for you. A number will contact you. Trust no one else. I love you always. B." I sank to the floor, the note clutched to my chest, and sobbed. Not from grief this time, but from confusion and a desperate, fragile hope. Benedict had planned this, the shack, the key, the safe. He'd known what his family would do. He'd known, and he'd left me a path forward. But to what? What was in London? Why all the secrecy? The mobile phone suddenly buzzed to life in my hand, making me jump. The screen lit up with a text message from an unknown UK number. "Mrs. Hartley, this is Mr. Thornbury, your late husband's attorney. Your flight departs in 36 hours. A car will collect you tomorrow at 3 p.m. Bring nothing but yourself. Everything you need will be provided." I stared at the message, my mind spinning. Tomorrow, 36 hours, London. I looked around the dusty room, at the jasmine plant still growing on the windowsill, at the note in Benedict's handwriting. What had my husband done? I didn't sleep that night. How could I? I sat on the bare mattress with Benedict's note in one hand and the mobile phone in the other, reading his words over and over until I'd memorized every loop of every letter. Everything is waiting for you. What everything? We'd had a good life together. Or so I'd thought. Benedict ran the family business, took occasional trips abroad, came home to me every night. We weren't rich, not like Constance made it seem, but we were comfortable. Happy, at least. I'd been happy. Had Benedict been planning this the whole time? Had he known he was going to die? The questions circled in my mind like vultures. I tried texting the UK number back, asking who Mr. Thornbury was, what was in London, why Benedict had done this. But no reply came, just silence and the sound of rain still pattering against the boarded windows. By the time grey dawn light crept through the cracks again, I'd made a decision. What choice did I have? I couldn't stay in this shack forever. I had £500 and nowhere else to go. If Benedict had left me something in London, I needed to find out what it was. I spent the day preparing as best I could. I used some of the cash to walk to the small shop I'd spotted on the taxi ride, in nearly an hour's walk down the muddy road. The elderly woman behind the counter stared at me like I was a ghost when I asked for directions back to Willow Creek. "You're staying in that old place?" she asked, her eyes wide. "Nobody's been there in 20 years, love. I inherited it," I said quietly. She made a sympathetic sound and sold me some bread, cheese, and bottled water without asking more questions. I was grateful for that. That night, I ate my first proper meal since the funeral, just bread and cheese. But my stomach had been so empty, it felt like a feast. I charged the mobile phone using the cable and an outlet that miraculously still worked. I laid out my clothes for the journey, what little I had that wasn't wrinkled beyond repair. And I tried not to think about what I was doing. Getting on a plane to London based on a note from my dead husband and a text from a stranger. It sounded mad when I put it that way, but what else did I have? The next day, at exactly 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I heard a car engine. I looked out through a gap in the boarded window and saw a sleek black car pulling up the muddy drive, completely out of place, in this forgotten corner of the world. A driver stepped out, dressed in a dark suit despite the mud and rain. He was young, professional, his face neutral and polite. He walked to the door and knocked. My heart hammered as I opened it. "Mrs. Hartley?" he asked. I nodded, not trusting my voice. "I'm here to take you to the airport. Do you have luggage?" I held up my single suitcase, the same one I'd arrived with. He took it without comment and opened the car door for me. The interior was leather and spotless. It smelled expensive, like Constance's cars used to smell. We drove in silence. I wanted to ask him questions. Who sent him? Who was Mr. Thornbury? What was waiting for me but his polite, closed expression told me he wouldn't answer. He was just the driver, nothing more. The journey to the airport took 3 hours. I watched the countryside roll past, then the suburbs, then the city coming back into view. Everything felt surreal, like I was watching my life happen to someone else. At the airport, he didn't drop me at the normal entrance. Instead, we pulled up to a smaller building off to the side. Private terminal, the sign said. This way, Mrs. Hartley, the driver said, carrying my suitcase inside. I'd never been in a private terminal before. It was quiet, elegant, with leather chairs and soft music playing. A woman in a crisp uniform checked my ticket and passport without any of the usual airport fuss. No queues, no crowds, no waiting. Your flight boards in 30 minutes, she said with a professional smile. Please make yourself comfortable. Would you like anything to drink? I shook my head, too overwhelmed to speak. 30 minutes later, I was walking across the tarmac to a plane, a proper commercial flight. But I was being escorted separately from the other passengers. The flight attendant led me to my seat in first class, right at the front. I'd never flown first class before. Benedict and I had travelled economy on our honeymoon to Scotland. This seat was huge, leather, with more legroom than I knew what to do with. Other passengers filed past, heading to their seats further back, and I felt like an imposter. As the plane took off, I pressed my face to the window and watched Atlanta disappear below me. Everything I'd known was down there, the mansion where I'd lived, the grave where Benedict lay, the family that had thrown me away. With every mile the plane climbed, I felt the distance growing. The flight attendant brought me food I barely tasted and wine I sipped without really drinking. She was kind, chatty in that professional way that made me feel less alone. Visiting London? She asked, as she refilled my water. I'm not sure, I admitted. It's complicated. First time? I nodded. You'll love it, she said warmly. Then she noticed my wedding ring. I was still wearing it, couldn't bring myself to take it off. Anniversary trip? The question hit me like a physical blow. My husband died, I heard myself say. 2 weeks ago. Her face crumpled with sympathy. Oh, love. I'm so sorry. I shouldn't have. It's fine, I said quickly, but tears were already spilling down my cheeks. You didn't know. Nobody knows. I'm sorry. I don't usually. Don't apologize, she said gently, handing me a tissue. Grief is nothing to apologize for. Take your time. She left me alone after that, and I cried quietly into my tissue while the plane carried me across the Atlantic. I cried for Benedict, for our lost future, for the confusion and loneliness that had become my whole world. I cried until I had nothing left, until I was hollow and exhausted. Somewhere over the ocean, I finally slept. I woke to the pilot's voice announcing our descent into London. My mouth was dry and my eyes felt swollen, but I looked out the window and saw England spread below me, patchwork fields, giving way to the sprawling city, the Thames snaking through it like a silver ribbon. After we landed, the same careful treatment continued. I was escorted off the plane first, through customs with barely a question asked, and into the arrivals hall, where a man in a dark suit stood holding a sign with my name on it. Mrs. Hartley? He said as I approached. Yes, I whispered. Welcome to London. I'm to take you to Mr. Thornbury's office. This way, please. Another car, another silent ride. But this time, I stared out the window at everything we passed. London was huge, busy, overwhelming. Red buses and black taxis. Buildings centuries old next to glass skyscrapers. People everywhere, moving with purpose while I felt completely lost. We drove through increasingly impressive neighbourhoods until we pulled up in front of a tall building in the financial district. Glass and steel, the kind of place that screamed money and power. The driver opened my door. Top floor, he said. Mr. Thornbury is expecting you. I stepped out onto the pavement, clutching my suitcase, staring up at the building that seemed to touch the sky. Inside, the lobby was all marble and polished brass. A receptionist directed me to a private lift. I rode it alone, watching the floor numbers climb 10, 20, 30, 40, until it stopped at the very top. The doors opened onto a quiet corridor with thick carpet and expensive artwork on the walls. At the end was a door marked Thornbury and Associates, Private Office. I knocked, my heart in my throat. Come in, a voice called. I pushed open the door and stepped into an office, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Thames. The view was breathtaking, all of London spread out like a glittering promise. Behind a massive oak desk sat a distinguished man with silver hair and kind eyes. He stood as I entered, buttoning his suit jacket, and extended his hand. "Mrs. Hartley," he said warmly. "Welcome. I've been expecting you. Your husband was a brilliant man, and what I'm about to tell you will change everything you think you know about your inheritance." Mr. Thornbury gestured to a leather chair facing his desk. "Please, sit down. You must be exhausted from your journey." I sat, still clutching my suitcase like it was the only solid thing in the world. He moved to a side table and poured tea from a silver pot into delicate china cups. "Milk? Sugar?" he asked. "Just milk, please," I managed to say. He handed me the cup, and I wrapped my hands around it, grateful for the warmth. My fingers were trembling. He sat across from me, his expression gentle but serious. "Before we begin, Mrs. Hartley, I need you to understand that everything your husband did was to protect you." I stared at him. Protect me from what? From his family. Mr. Thornbury leaned forward, his hands clasped on the desk. "Benedict came to me 4 years ago, long before you knew anything was wrong. He asked me to help him with something very delicate, restructuring his entire estate in complete secrecy. 4 years ago." My voice came out as a whisper. "But he only died 2 weeks ago. How did he know?" "He didn't know when, Mr. Thornbury said quietly. "But he knew his heart condition would kill him eventually. The doctors told him he had perhaps 5 to 10 years if he was lucky. He chose to spend that time making sure you would be safe when he was gone." The teacup rattled in my saucer. I set it down before I dropped it. "I don't understand." "The will in Atlanta," was exactly what Benedict wanted them to hear. Mr. Thornbury stood and walked to a filing cabinet, pulling out a thick leather folder. He placed it on the desk in front of me. "The Hartley mansion, the family company, the cars, all the assets your mother-in-law and sister-in-law inherited, every single piece was drowning in debt." I stared at the folder but didn't touch it. "What?" "For the past 2 years, Benedict systematically bankrupted the American operations. He took out loans against the properties. He made terrible investments that he knew would fail. He sold off profitable divisions and kept only the failing ones. On paper, the Hartley estate looks valuable. In reality, it's worthless." My mind struggled to process this. But why? Why would he destroy his own family business? Mr. Thornbury's expression hardened. "Because he knew his family, Mrs. Hartley. He knew that if he left you anything of obvious value, they would contest the will. They would drag you through courts for years. They would make your life a living nightmare until you gave up everything just to escape them." I thought of Constance's cold eyes, Felicity's cruel laughter. Yes, they would have done exactly that, so he made sure they inherited nothing worth having. I said slowly. "Precisely." Mr. Thornbury opened the folder and pulled out documents. "Within the next 3 months, the banks will foreclose on the mansion. Hartley Enterprises will declare bankruptcy. Your mother-in-law and sister-in-law will be left with nothing but debt and legal fees." A strange feeling twisted in my chest, not quite satisfaction, but something close to it. "They threw me out," I heard myself say. "They called me worthless. They took everything and laughed at me." Benedict knew they would. Mr. Thornbury slid papers across the desk toward me, which is why he built something else, something they knew nothing about. I looked down at the documents. Company registration papers, asset statements, bank accounts. The numbers were so large I couldn't make sense of them at first. "What is this?" I asked. "This, Mr. Thornbury said, is DL Global Holdings, a multinational corporation with headquarters here in London and operations in 12 countries. Manufacturing, technology, commercial real estate. Your husband built it over the course of 4 years, piece by piece, using shell companies and offshore accounts to keep it completely hidden from his family." I picked up one of the papers with shaking hands. "How much is it worth?" "Currently, just over £200 million. The number didn't make sense. It was too big, too impossible." "That can't be right." "I assure you it is." He pulled out more documents, photographs of office buildings, factories, contracts with companies I'd heard of. Benedict was a brilliant businessman, Mrs. Hartley. When he wasn't constrained by his family's interference and outdated methods, he was unstoppable. He built an empire in secret. But how? How did he hide all this? How did I not know? His business trips, Mr. Thornbury said simply. He told you he was managing Hartley Enterprises operations abroad, didn't he? In truth, he was here, building this, for you. I felt dizzy. All those trips, Benedict gone for days or weeks at a time. I'd missed him, but I'd trusted him. I'd never questioned. And all along, he was building this impossible thing. And it's mine? I asked, my voice barely audible. Mr. Thornbury pulled out one final document and turned it so I could read it. Articles of incorporation. Director and shareholder information. My name was on every line. Sole shareholder. Sole director. Established 3 years ago, when Benedict's doctors told him his condition was worsening faster than expected. Everything, every building, every account, every asset belongs entirely to you. I started crying. I couldn't help it. The tears just came, rolling down my face while I stared at my name written in legal print on document after document. Benedict had done this. While I'd been living in that mansion, being tolerated by his horrible family, he'd been protecting me, building a future for me. Why didn't he tell me? I sobbed. Why did he keep this secret? Mr. Thornbury handed me a box of tissues. He wanted to, he said gently. But if you'd known, you might have acted differently around his family. You might have let something slip, or seemed too confident when they tried to diminish you. Benedict needed them to believe you were vulnerable. He needed them to take the bait to grab what they thought was valuable and leave you with what they thought was worthless. The shack, I whispered. The property in Willow Creek was the key. A place so obviously worthless that they'd never contest it, never look at it twice. But Benedict had been there months ago, setting everything up, the safe, the ticket, the instructions. He knew you'd be thrown out. He knew you'd have nowhere else to go. So he left you a path forward. I wiped my eyes, trying to compose myself. And the jasmine plant. Mr. Thornbury smiled, the first real smile I'd seen from him. He insisted on that detail. He said you'd recognize it, that you'd know it meant something, and start looking. He was right, wasn't he? I nodded, fresh tears spilling over. It was the flower he gave me on our first date. He remembered that until the very end. Mr. Thornbury pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket. He left this for you. He asked me to give it to you only after I'd explained everything else. The envelope was sealed, marked, Lydia, open alone, in Benedict's handwriting. Take your time, Mr. Thornbury said, standing. I'll give you privacy. There's a restroom through that door if you need it, and help yourself to more tea. When you're ready, we'll discuss next steps, the company, your position, everything you'll need to know. He left the office, closing the door softly behind him. I sat alone in that beautiful office overlooking London, holding my husband's final letter. My hands shook as I broke the seal and unfolded the pages. His handwriting filled 3 sheets, and I began to read. My dearest Lydia, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and my plan has worked. You're in London. You've met Thornbury, and you know the truth now. I'm so sorry I couldn't tell you while I was alive. I'm sorry for every secret, every trip away, every moment. I couldn't explain why. I discovered my heart condition 6 years ago, just before I met you. The doctors said I had time, maybe 5 years, maybe 10 if I was lucky. Then I met you, and everything changed. You were so beautiful, standing in that cafe with flour on your cheek from the kitchen. You smiled at me like I was just another customer, not a Hartley, not someone who came with expectations and family baggage. For the first time in my life, someone saw just me. I knew I loved you within a month. I knew I wanted to marry you within 3. But I also knew my family would never accept you, not because of anything wrong with you, but because you weren't like them. You had kindness where they had cruelty, warmth where they had ice. I had to stop reading and wipe my eyes. Benedict's words felt like he was in the room with me, speaking directly to my heart. I took a shaky breath and continued. I married you knowing I would die young. I married you knowing my family would try to destroy you when I was gone. That might sound cruel, but I couldn't give you up, Lydia. You were the only good thing in my life, and I was selfish enough to want whatever time we could have together. But I also made a promise to myself I would not leave you at their mercy. So, I built this. Every business trip, every late night at the office, every moment away from you that I hated, I was building your future. A future where you'd never have to bow to anyone, where you'd have freedom, security, and the power to choose your own path. The hardest part was watching them treat you badly and not being able to defend you properly. I had to let them believe you were weak, that I'd made a poor choice in marrying you. If they'd suspected how much I truly valued you, they would have fought harder for everything after I died. You deserved better than my family ever gave you. Now you have what you truly deserve: freedom, security, and an empire to run however you see fit. Build something beautiful, my love. Expand it. Change it. Make it yours in every way. The company is just the foundation. What you do with it is up to you. And when you think of me, know that my last act was ensuring you'd never bow to anyone again. You are stronger than you know, braver than you believe, and more capable than anyone, including yourself, has ever given you credit for. I love you, Lydia. I loved you from that first smile in the cafe, and I'll love you beyond death, just like the jasmine flowers promised. Build something beautiful for both of us. Forever yours, Benedict. I folded the letter carefully and pressed it to my chest, crying until I had no tears left. He'd known everything that would happen, the cruelty, the eviction, my devastation, and he'd planned around it all. Not to spare me the pain, because that was impossible, but to make sure I'd survive it, to make sure I'd thrive after it. When Mr. Thornbury returned 20 minutes later, I'd composed myself as much as possible. My eyes were red, but my hands were steady. "Are you all right, Mrs. Hartley?" he asked gently. "I will be," I said, and for the first time since Benedict died, I meant it. That day marked the beginning of my new life. Mr. Thornbury spent hours explaining everything: the company structure, the various divisions, the people I'd need to meet. It was overwhelming, but he was patient, breaking everything down into manageable pieces. "You don't have to learn it all at once," he assured me. "We have excellent managers running each division. Your job initially is simply to understand the scope of what you own and to start making decisions about the direction you want to take." Over the following weeks, he introduced me to the company's senior staff. They were professionals, respectful, competent, initially skeptical of the grieving widow who'd suddenly appeared as their new CEO. But Mr. Thornbury had prepared for that too. "Show them Benedict's vision," he'd advised. "Show them you understand what he built and why. They'll respect that." So I studied. I read every file, every report, every piece of documentation about DL Global Holdings. I sat in meetings and asked questions, taking notes, learning the language of business that had always seemed so foreign to me. At night, in the beautiful flat Mr. Thornbury had arranged for me in central London, I'd review everything again, pushing through exhaustion because I owed this to Benedict. I owed it to myself. Slowly, things began to change. 3 months after arriving in London, I walked into a board meeting with a proposal. Not something Mr. Thornbury had written for me, but my own idea, expanding the company's manufacturing division to include sustainable materials, partnering with environmental organizations, positioning DL Global as an industry leader in responsible business. The board members listened. Some were skeptical, but I'd prepared for their objections. I'd run the numbers, consulted with experts, built a solid case. When the vote came, my proposal passed. That night, standing in my office overlooking the Thames, I felt something shift inside me. I wasn't just Benedict's widow anymore, playing a role he'd left for me. I was becoming someone new, someone stronger. Mr. Thornbury knocked on my open door, smiling. "Well done today, Mrs. Hartley. Benedict would be proud." "Thank you," I said, "for everything, for helping me find my way through all of this." "It's been my privilege," he said, then more hesitantly. There's something you should know. News from Atlanta. My stomach tightened. What kind of news? The Hartley mansion was seized by the banks yesterday. Your mother-in-law and sister-in-law were evicted. The story's all over the society pages. Quite the scandal, apparently. I turned back to the window, watching lights twinkle across the city. I waited for satisfaction, for vindication, but all I felt was a distant sadness. Where will they go? I'm told they've found a small flat to rent. Felicity has taken a job as a sales assistant. Constance is struggling with the adjustment. I thought of Constance's designer clothes, her pearl necklaces, her cruel superiority. I thought of Felicity's laughter as she recorded my humiliation. They'd lost everything, just as Benedict had planned. Good, I said quietly. Then I surprised myself by adding, but if they truly become destitute, if they have nothing, let me know. Mr. Thornbury raised an eyebrow. You'd help them, after everything? I'd make sure they survive, I said carefully. Not for them. For Benedict. He wouldn't want his mother starving on the streets, no matter how horrible she was. But I won't give them luxury. Just survival. There's a difference. He nodded. Understanding. You're more generous than they deserve. Maybe, I agreed. But I'm not them. I won't become cruel just because they were cruel to me. 3 months later, Constance called my mobile. I don't know how she got the number. Her voice was different, smaller, with none of its former venom. Lydia, she said. We need help. Felicity and I. The debts are overwhelming, and we have nowhere to turn. I let the silence stretch. Let her feel the weight of asking me, the woman she'd thrown out in the rain, for mercy. I'll arrange a small monthly allowance, I finally said. Enough for rent and basic expenses. Nothing more. And Constance? If you contact me again asking for more, the allowance stops. Permanently. Do you understand? Yes, she whispered. Thank you. I hung up without saying goodbye. 6 months after arriving in London, I established the Benedict Hartley Foundation, funding research into heart disease and providing support for families dealing with sudden loss. The board approved it unanimously, and the first grants went out within weeks. Standing at the foundation's launch event, giving a speech to donors and medical professionals, I realized how far I'd traveled, not just in miles from that shack in Willow Creek, but in myself. I spoke confidently about Benedict's legacy, about the importance of the work, about hope for the future. That evening, I returned to my office and found Mr. Thornbury waiting with champagne. To the future, he said, raising his glass. To the future, I echoed. After he left, I sat at my desk as the sun set over London. I pulled out the jasmine pot I'd brought from Willow Creek. It sat on my windowsill now, thriving under my care. Next to it was Benedict's letter, kept in a silver frame where I could see it every day. My mobile buzzed with a message from Mr. Thornbury. Board meeting tomorrow at 9 a.m. The Tokyo expansion proposal. You're doing brilliantly, Mrs. Hartley. I smiled a real smile, the kind I hadn't thought I'd ever feel again. I wasn't the broken woman standing in the rain anymore. I wasn't the poor girl playing dress-up in someone else's world. I was Lydia Hartley, CEO of DL Global Holdings. A leader, a philanthropist, a survivor who'd taken devastation and transformed it into purpose. Benedict had given me the tools, but I'd built this new life myself, and it was beautiful. I whispered to the jasmine plant, to Benedict's memory, to the future spreading out before me like the glittering city below. I built something beautiful, my love, just like you asked.